papers moving and things like that. So I used to tell them, because they used to get very discouraged that this is something that I cannot do. And I used to tell them that think about a parking lot where there are too many cars to move. This is what is happening to you right now, because you are getting a lot of information that you cannot process. Be patient, process that information. Convert that parking lot into a more organized lot where there are cars that can actually move, and there are cars sitting neatly in spaces. And when you have done that, that will come through practice. The more familiar you are with the subject, the better you will be at it. So that is at an intellectual level, but that takes time. So if you are new to math, you might struggle for the first 6 months, but then you'll do much better. Will you be the absolute genius in the world? No, because there'll be somebody else who knows it better than you. It always happens. But you'll be better 6 months from now compared to what you are today. Vertical and lateral thinking. Now, we had some lateral thinking in-house already, and we had a couple of like different suggestions for one of the problems that I had talked about. Lateral thinking is when you skim the top of your ideas. You have a problem, you think about all the different possible solutions without actually trying to analyze a solution to see if it would work. So lateral thinking is like brainstorming. You think about all solutions irrespective of whether or not they seem feasible to you at that point of time. They might not seem feasible, but hey, but that's a solution. So let's talk about it. Vertical thinking is quite different. Vertical thinking is when you grab a solution and you delve deeper into it and try to analyze the pros and cons, what you will get in terms of return, your ROI, and whether or not that is the best solution for you. So lateral thinking is when you try to find different options. Vertical thinking is when you go into one option after the other in detail, work it all the way through, and figure out which is the best option for you. Yes, go ahead.
So is this similar to deductive and inductive reasoning?
I am not very familiar with those, but can you explain this a little more?
For deductive reasoning, you take all the factors into account, and then using that knowledge, you come to a solution, whereas inductive, you kind of work the opposite way. Where you have a solution, you kind of try to understand the problem based on the solution.
That sounds quite like that. That sounds quite like that. What I would suggest is contact Mike, because this seems to be a very good topic for a PMI discussion. Contact Mike and see if we can talk at one of the future luncheons, and I'll come to see your talk. But that sounds like a very interesting idea. Concept. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is thinking. Words of wisdom. Does this first one make sense? You cannot look in a new direction by looking harder in the same direction. So you're looking at a problem from this angle and you're not able to find a solution. You need to change your perspective and look from a different angle, because if you keep looking at it from the same angle, just because you're resistant to change, like you pointed out, you might not be able to find a solution to the problem, right? And Charles Darwin said that it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. So change is a very big factor in your own progress. I mean, the progress of all of us and of our companies, the companies we work in, and everything. Let us do a couple of lateral thinking exercises. So you have 2 coins totaling 11 pence, and one of the coins is not a penny. What are the 2 coins? Any suggestions about solution to this one? Beg your pardon?
The other one is.
One of the coins is not a penny, the other one is. Thank you. The other one is, so one is a 10 cent, the other one is a penny. Good, thank you. If you were alone in a deserted house at night and there was an oil lamp, a candle, firewood, and you have only one match, which one would you light first? The firewood? The match. Okay, thank you. Thank you. What can you put in a wooden box that will make it lighter? Holes, okay. Great. We have a couple of very adept lateral thinkers in here. Thank you. Okay, mental blocks revisited. So we talked about the symptoms of mental blocks, and we haven't really talked about unable to perform at your full potential. Yes, go ahead.
You kind of skipped emotional. You covered in depth physical and intellectual, but didn't get. Are you going to get to emotional?
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct. This is the one that is talking about emotional.
Okay.
So we talked about physical and intellectual, right? And the first three are covering that. We haven't really talked in depth about emotional because that is a whole different animal. That's a whole different animal. It's a totally different ballgame. If you feel that you are unable to perform at your full potential, then the cause for that feeling is probably more emotional than physical or intellectual. There might be some intellectual contribution, there might be some physical contribution. But if your emotional contribution is complete, then you will find those physical and intellectual things to do to help you perform at your full potential. And the outcome of not performing at your full potential is accomplish less than you can. Let us read this, okay? By far the subtlest and most powerful impacts to performance come from psychological attributes that are typically intangible and subjective. Developing these attributes will go a long way in helping you overcome intimidating situations. So we talked about the air hostess, the stewardess, we talked about the project managers, we talked about overcoming fear, we talked about change, resistance to change. The emotional factors, if you can have emotional mastery, which is called emotional intelligence, or if you can develop that attitude, then that can take you so far. So so when we talk about overcoming mental blocks, emotional factors, we are talking about attitude, about emotional intelligence, self-confidence, ownership, and incentives. Which one of these jumps out at you as being the most important? Beg your pardon? Self-confidence. Self-confidence. Okay. Self-worth. Self-worth goes hand in hand with self-confidence. And it is every bit as important. If you do not feel that you are, that you deserve to be a manager, a project manager, a team lead, or the director or the VP, it's going to be very difficult for you to get there. By you, I'm meaning, all of us, of course. If I don't feel that I can lead a project, if I don't have the feeling of self-confidence and self-worth, then I can never lead a project. And I have seen many people who actually have the ability of doing these things, but they don't feel that they are worthy of the recognition or they are worthy of their position, so they don't try for that position, just because they don't feel they can do it. But when I have talked to them, I have been very impressed with their abilities. We talked a little about ownership and we talked about incentives. These are all very useful for project managers, but I'm sure that most of you have dealt with these at some level of or the other during your work, so I won't spend too much time talking about these. Let us talk about attitude. What is one of the, yes, go ahead.
I have a question about how you would utilize incentives to overcome emotional blocks. I guess you want to talk about it.
How do incentives overcome mental block? By giving you that extra push that you need to do something.
So would that work with physical and intellectual?
That typically works, you can